welcome back to my channel. I'm Maddie if you're new. This is part 3 in my little series that I'm doing. The first part was things to consider when you're purchasing a home, like when you're in the house hunting phase. The second one was about renovating, and now this third one is probably the most fun and like applicable to the most amount of people, which is tips for decorating your space or things to know before you get started, how to get started, that kind of thing. And this is also the most exciting for me because this is the phase that I am in. I purchased a house recently and we haven't even moved in yet. So I'm kind of in this phase of, okay, what should I be thinking about? What should I be considering before I really get in there and decorate the space? So I am going to be sharing my tips with you. These are based on my previous house that I bought, renovated, and decorated, kind of things that I've learned, how I'd approach things a bit differently. And this isn't going to go too deep because I feel like my next several videos are going to actually be me getting into my space and decorating it and taking you guys along with me. So this is just a little taste and like a precursor to that. Okay, let's dive in. First, I'm going to share kind of my order of operations, things I would consider like in chronological order, and then I'm going to get into some extra tips. So the first thing that I would consider when decorating a space, whether this is a brand new space that's just been built, you've just moved into it, or maybe you have owned this house for years or have been renting this house for months and you want to redecorate a space. The same thing applies for all those scenarios. I would consider the architecture first. When you are in a space, what are the architectural elements? Because those aren't going to change. So things like windows, fireplaces, walls and ceilings, doors, stairs, as well as more like uncommon things. For example, like those old radiators that look like this, or like pillars or beams like this. Those things aren't going anywhere, so we have to design around them in order to create a space that feels comfortable and makes sense. I would stand in the middle of your space and look around and just take mental note of all of those things, especially things that stand out, like things that are outside of just a box, you know, like 4 walls. What are the things that will kind of keep you from being able to place furniture just anywhere? You obviously can't place a couch right in front of a fireplace, for example. And you also probably don't want to place your bed right in front of your windows because that would block a lot of your light. I think this is kind of a feng shui thing, but as humans, we innately really like to be able to see the exit and entrance of a space when we are comfortably enjoying the space. So whether we're in bed or sitting on a couch or working at our desk, it is most feng shui and most sort of comfortable if we either are facing or can very easily see in our line of sight the door, like the doorway or the entrance to the space. This isn't a rule that we can always follow. A lot of spaces are unique and weird, and it's just not possible to always follow that. But it is something that I like to keep in mind when I'm thinking about where to place my furniture. After you've considered like the architectural elements in your space, like in the room that you're focusing on at the moment, then I would move into kind of cataloging and mood boarding all of the permanent materials in the space. And what I mean by that are the materials in a space that you can't change. So the floors, what kind of floors are they? Are they wood? What tone of wood are they? Get like a good image of them, or find a good image that's comparable online and add that to your little palette. Same with wall color if you're not painting the walls. Make sure you include the trim color if your walls and your trim are different colors. In rooms like bathrooms and kitchens, you definitely also have to consider your cabinet color or material, the material of your countertops, any tile that appears in the space. Maybe you have stainless steel appliances, that's another sort of permanent material. Start to gather images of all of those materials so that anytime you add in a new element, you can make sure that it feels at home with the current palette. Next, I'd recommend thinking about the pieces, mostly like the furniture pieces that you definitely want to keep in the space, things that you love or that you just don't have the option of switching out, so that you can build your space around those. Like, let's say you have a couch that you are going to keep, whether it's because you love it or you just can't afford to buy a new couch at the moment. That's another version of like a permanent fixture or piece in your space that you need to design around. So if you have pieces like that you love or that you're not getting rid of, catalog those too, add them to your mood board, and start to just get that palette really built out with the things that are definitely going to appear in the space. That's important not just because of the palette and the colors and the materials that you are going to be curating, but also because of the space plan. So if you have that couch that you're definitely going to be keeping, that's a really good place to start with your space plan, because you know the size, you know how it can be oriented, and you can start to figure out where that piece is going to be placed, especially if it's something big like a couch. Something like a lamp or a smaller chair, of course, is going to give you more flexibility. Like, you can pretty much put things like that anywhere, but especially those bigger permanent pieces, I would start with those. So I would start by measuring the space that you're working with, just going one room at a time, making those measurements and then drawing them out on a grid paper, either digitally or by hand. And this is going to allow you to start to figure out the flow of the room. They say that a walking path, like the most comfortable walking path, is at least 3 feet wide. And in smaller spaces, you might have to compromise on that a little bit, which is completely fine. But I think it's a good rule of thumb to start with, is that 3 feet of walking space. So think about the room you're focusing on, what rooms are connected to that room, and how someone would most comfortably walk in and out of the space, and highlight on your floor plan what those are, because then you can start to place your furniture like around those and make sure that you're not cutting too much into the ideal flow and the walking paths of the space. This also gives you a really good idea of, if you need to bring new furniture in, how much space you have to work with, and so what size furniture you can afford to bring into the space. If you have furniture already, like I said, those permanent pieces that you are keeping in your space, sketch out some possibilities of where they could go. And you may not know for sure while you're doing this like digital or like sketched out space plan exactly where your furniture should go. Sometimes it does take some moving around in real space, but it is a really good way to just see what your options are before committing to bringing anything new into your space. So play around and figure out what your like ideal floor plan would be, and what new furniture you need to bring into the room to kind of make that come to life. So it's kind of two things you're working with here, right? It's like the colors and textures and patterns and materials and the palette of the room. And then there's the space plan and the flow and where elements are placed within the space. So now you have that material palette, and anytime you're looking for a new piece of furniture or thinking about what color to paint the wall, what color or texture you want to bring in for the window treatments, you can just grab little screenshots and put them next to that existing mood board and see what works and what doesn't. And same goes for your space plan. As you're thinking about new furniture to bring in, you can kind of drop those things into your floor plan and see what works and what doesn't in terms of size and orientation. I mentioned in the last video that I am going to be making sort of dedicated videos on paint colors, window treatments, and lighting, and I still am going to be doing that, so I won't talk much more about that in this video. But if you have questions on those things in particular, feel free to leave them in the comments so I can make sure that I touch on that in those videos. Okay, so that's kind of my order of operations and how I would approach sort of starting this process. And now I'm going to share my extra little tips and tricks. And my first one is take it slow. I talked about this also in my video about making your space cozy, and I feel like that's a really good video to watch after this if you haven't seen it yet. But let your space be an evolving project. I've made the mistake before of like rushing the process and like redecorating one room all in one weekend or even 1 week, and it never goes well. So I am really challenging myself in this next house, in all of the different spaces in the house, to start very simple and let it evolve and grow. There's obviously pieces of decor that I love and will keep forever, so I'm gonna decorate with those. I'm going to bring those right into the space. I'm gonna start buying plants because I love plants and I really want to like replenish my collection that I had to get rid of back in Colorado. But in terms of just filling space, don't do that. Especially if you're someone that really enjoys shopping for decor, thrifting, and going to estate sales and things like that. Wait until you find something that you can't live without and that really is calling your name, as opposed to just going out and trying to fill all of your shelf space or, you know, things like that. That is my number one tip, and it's a tip I need to follow myself and that I am going to stick with this time around. My next tip is to consider how each room connects with its sort of adjoining rooms and how they speak to each other. I don't think that you have to have the same exact style and aesthetic all over your entire house if you don't want to. I do feel like you can bring in some different feelings in different spaces, like maybe paint them different colors or whatever. I think that's totally fine. But what I don't recommend is having a completely different visual voice from room to room. And honestly, if you're decorating your space authentically and taking it slower and just bringing in things you love, it's all gonna feel very cohesive. But I do just think it's important to think about, for example, maybe your living room very much connects with your dining room. You almost have to treat that as the same space. When it comes to choosing wall colors and window treatments and things like that, because they are connected to each other and you have a line of sight from one to the other. So just making sure that you're not sort of doing anything too crazy to make it overwhelming to be in a room and seeing the adjoining rooms, if that makes sense. My next tip is to not buy furniture sets. I see people do this all the time, and I think it's such a bummer, and it just makes your home look cheap and a little bit more boring, and it's also just a real missed opportunity to bring unique pieces into your house. And so that leads me to my next tip, which is especially for like hard furniture like tables and chairs and dressers and credenzas and sideboards and side tables and things like that. Try to scour secondhand stores and Facebook Marketplace before you even think about going to a big box store. Some of you guys are probably already in on the thrifting of it all, but some of my friends still are not convinced that thrifting is the way to go when it comes to these things. And so I just want to say, give it a chance and you will not regret it. There are so many beautiful pieces that you can find secondhand for so affordable. And it just makes your home feel so much more cozy and when you bring in unique pieces that, you know, you can't just walk past in Target or something like that. And that goes right along with the point of taking your time with it. It might take you some time to come across the perfect dining room table, let's just say, when you're finding it secondhand. And that's when it can be really tempting to just buy something from Target or Amazon, or even like splurging on something from West Elm or whatever. But especially if you already have a dining table and you're just looking to replace it, or you have even like a plastic fold-out table that you can use in the interim while you look, I highly recommend doing that over rushing the process and getting something that's not special or unique. Again, this is a tip for myself too, because I get really impatient and I just want my space to look how I want it to look. And sometimes I don't give myself enough time to really like allow the right pieces to come to me, if that makes sense. Okay, my last tip is like kind of obvious, but I did just want to say it. Plants make such a big difference in a space. It's kind of crazy, especially just like the organic nature of them. If you notice, anytime you're watching someone redo their room, either on YouTube or like HGTV, it's kind of crazy how it can look so sterile and boring. And then all of a sudden they literally put one plant on the shelf and it's like, wow, it really brings it together. Like, it really does. So if you don't already have houseplants in your life, I would highly recommend getting into that if interior design and like making your space cozy is something that is, you know, of interest to you, because it really does help to bring like a living, breathing thing into your space. So yeah, I'm gonna be doing some more videos on that too, because I am kind of in my houseplant era and my gardening era, and I'm very excited when we move into our house to restart my plant collection and get out and garden outside. So yeah, stay tuned for that journey for me, and hopefully this was helpful for you guys. I feel like this was a bit of a shorter video compared to the other parts in this series, but like I said, basically my entire channel is now dedicated to decorating my new space whenever we move in. So stick around for that. Make sure you're subscribed, give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and I'll see you guys in the next one.